The Lilies of the Field by William E. Barrett. Chapter 2. One of the privileges of freedom was that a man slept until he felt like rising, with no bugles blowing. Homer Smith was not a late sleeper, but he did not believe in stumbling around in half-light, waking up birds. The morning was nicely lighted in the sky when he rose, filled his bucket at the well, and hauled it beyond the barn. There was a hammer hammering, and from the corners of his eyes he could see Mother Maria Martha watching him while he was filling his bucket. She did not bother him until he came back to the station wagon. Then she descended angrily. "Schmidt!" Her words tumbled out, and they were so German, or so German English, that they were incomprehensible. She did not, however, need words to convey meaning. She needed only gestures and emphasis. The gist of the message was plain. He was a lazy loafer who had no business sacking out when there was work to be done. Homer drew himself up, looking at her from his commanding height, as angry as she was. "Look," he said, "I ain't no nun, and I ain't no hired hand neither. I get up when I feel like getting up. If I don't want to work, I don't work." He did not awe her. She stamped her foot, pointing emphatically at the house. "Geh," she said. "Mach schnell." Being commanded to go to the house meant that he was expected to eat breakfast. That was an idea that made sense. He turned away, still angry. Sister Albertine greeted him shyly in the communal dining room. She had obviously been forced to waste her time preparing a late breakfast for him, and she was nervous about it. She set 2 fried eggs before him, following them with 2 slabs of coarse bread, toasted. There was no coffee, only the inevitable milk. "Old Mother sure sets a poor table," Homer said. "How come she can afford all that lumber outside and no money for chow?" Sister Albertine stared at him. Her large eyes seeming larger still, she tried to understand him. Homer didn't expect her to understand him. It was a comfort to him to express his feelings in words with a human audience to listen to him. He did not require a response. "There's a mean streak in that old woman," he said. "I don't know why you girls put up with her. People got to sleep. People got to eat. People got to have a little joy in living. She don't go for that. All this milk all the time and no coffee. And no milk of human kindness neither. That woman just hasn't got it." Sister Albertine gestured helplessly. "I do not understand," she said. "Speak slowly, please." Her English sounded like English, or more like English than Mother Maria Martha's, even if she did speak one word at a time. "I'm going to give you some soup," he said. "I got some soup in the car. Emergency rations. Got a can of peaches, too. You wait right here. I'll bring them right in." Sister Albertine looked frightened, but there was one note in the human voice that she understood, the note of command. She nodded her head weakly and started clearing the dishes from the table. Homer strolled out to the station wagon. "I hope old Mother tries to stop me," he said. "Just let her ask me what I'm doing." He was in a high, exalted mood, flying the flags of rebellion against authority. No one attempted to stop him, and he took 5 cans of soup out of his locker, a can of peaches, a can opener. He saw Mother Maria Martha bearing down on him as he started back to the house, and his flags drooped on the flagstaff. He pretended that he did not see her and lengthened his stride. He piled his cans on the table, resisting the impulse to look over his shoulder. He went through the pantomime of opening the cans for the benefit of Sister Albertine. "Soup," he said. "Ja, thank you." She looked interested, but she also looked fearful. She did not have the authority to accept gifts, but she lacked the vocabulary necessary to refuse acceptance or to explain her dilemma. Homer sensed it. "Old Mother will like that soup," he said. "Save a little wear and tear on that cow and those chickens." He went out to face the dragon, and the dragon was waiting for him. Schmidt, Mother Maria Martha said. We build a chapel. I show you. She led the way with firm tread to the old foundation over which a house had burned. Coarse grasses had grown around it, and the foundation itself was a pit into which ash and brick and partially consumed timbers had fallen. She reached into her pocket and produced a sketch on a piece of coarse wrapping paper. It was a good sketch of a small church, a frame church that looked like many Baptist churches in the South, except that it did not have a steeple. There was a cross on the first roof truss above the door. "Who builds it?" he said. Her eyes drilled into him. She was patient, and she could wait upon the perception of a dull-witted male. Homer looked from the unsightly foundation to the sketch and back again. There was a pile of new lumber behind the barn. "If you think that I'm building that, you're out of your mind," he said. "I'm one man. I ain't no contractor with a crew. I don't need all that work neither." He handed the sketch back to her. "No." There was hard-eyed contempt in that old woman's face. She folded the sketch into a hidden pocket. "We are women," she said. "We build it." "All right, you build it." Anger boiled and bubbled in Homer Smith. He could feel the steam from it rising into his brain. He looked away from Mother Maria Martha, and it helped to bring his anger down to a simmer, not looking at her. She was a mean-minded, overriding, unreasonable old woman. He was going to go get in his station wagon and drive. The warmth of the day touched his skin, and he was looking toward the debris in the foundation. He had had his breakfast. Breakfast sort of committed a man to the day. He felt strongly about people passing judgment on him, and he did not want this woman justified in thinking ill of him. "I'll clean that old foundation for you before I go," he said. He walked away from her, tall in his pride. There was a scoop shovel in the tool house and, surprisingly, a crowbar. He had a spade in the car. He came back and surveyed the ruin of the house. The builder had put down a solid foundation of granite. Not many farmhouses in this section of the country were built like this. It made sense. A man had to have a cool place for his perishable stuff. The big house where the nuns lived was probably built the same way. The chimney stood above the foundation, tall and built of brick, a lonely thing without a house to keep it company. Strange how it burned the man's house and left his privy. Homer shook his head over the familiar thought as he surveyed the ruin. The years had fallen on the grave of that house, snows and rains and blowing sand. The debris was packed into the pit, and it looked like a town dump set in cement. A bulldozer would turn it up fast. He knew how to handle a bulldozer, but this was a place of hungry labor where a man was lucky because he had a shovel and a crowbar. Resentment against Mother Maria Martha moved hotly in him again. He paced off the dimensions of the foundation, confirming what his eye told him. It was 18 by 26. He dropped down into the pit and started probing. It had been a hot fire, and the house had probably gone fast. Some of the lumber had survived, charred, but not burned through. Someone had started the cleaning out process long ago and quit. It was impossible to tell how that fire had gone. It probably smothered out some way. Maybe it happened in the winter and the snow came. There weren't any clues left to show what had happened to the roof. He did not believe that it had been reduced to ash. "Old farmer took him some salvage," he said. "Hauled away what would haul." He was encouraged when he discovered that the burned lumber moved against his pry. It had partially roofed the excavation. This hole wasn't as solidly packed as it looked. Fire-eaten though they were, the lumbers were heavy, and he strained his muscles against them, heaving them out. His body absorbed thought and emotion, condensing them into sweat. When he heard a bell ringing in the distance, he did not immediately translate it into meaning. "Old mother going to feed the slaves," he said. Resentment returned. He was filthy. Clouds of black ash rose from his work clothes. when he slapped them. He went to the station wagon for his bucket and washed in cold water from the well, accepting the icy touch of it gratefully. The nuns were standing in their places at the table waiting for him before starting their prayers. He didn't say Catholic prayers with them, but he had to be there. It was some idea in old Mother's mind. He bowed his head. He had a prayer in his own heart when he accepted food. Nobody took food for granted when he was a child. It wasn't always easy to get, and a person learned to be thankful when it was there. He sat down at the table, and there were soup plates at each place. Sister Albertine came in with a pot and a ladle. She looked happy. All the nuns looked happy. Mother Maria Martha didn't look exactly happy, but she didn't look as stern as usual. Homer's mood lifted. They were serving his soup. Nobody talked. That seemed to be the rule at lunchtime. Still, without talking, it was a pleasant meal. Nice atmosphere. These girls, Homer thought, need better food. He wished that he had more cans in his car. He didn't feel full-fed when he rose, but his stomach was friendly to him. When a man felt welcome at a table, the food tasted better. He was whistling when he returned to the excavation. He stood with his hands in his pockets looking at it. Old Mother, he repeated to himself, was out of her mind. Nobody could build a church like her drawing unless he was a contractor with people working for him, people skilled in doing different things. Women weren't ever going to build it, especially not women that built a fence so clumsy, all of which made cleaning out all of this mess ridiculous. He had told her that he'd clean it out before he left, however, and he'd do it. He was a strong man, and the work went fast when he didn't think about it. He got all of the odds and ends of wood and metal out of the hole, then worked them into the trench about a dozen yards away. He cleaned the stone steps that had led into the cellar from the outside, but the cellar was deep. A man could walk around in it with the top of his head underground. Getting out the ash and the sand was not mere shoveling, it was hauling. He did not want to use his own pail, so he rummaged around in the barn until he found a bucket that had seen hard service. After that, monotony claimed him, shoveling, filling, carrying out, and dumping. He created a refuge pile that would have to be leveled off someday, but he had no alternative, and it did not worry him. Blue dusk came down on an uncompleted job, and his muscles ached. The distant bell rang again. They were back to eggs for the evening meal. The eggs irritated him. He was tired and hungry, and he'd spent his day doing a job that didn't add up to anything. There wasn't enough food to satisfy him, and Mother Maria Martha sat stiffly at the head of the table, keeping everything on a low key. She never said a word of thanks to anybody for anything. "I'm going to get me my pay and leave." The resolve sustained him, even when he was swept into an English lesson after dinner. The nuns, he discovered, had been studying English, not merely trying to learn it from a phonograph record. They brought their books with them, and they knew many English words. Their problem was that they never heard anyone speak those words, and they had no practice in speaking them. Homer was not in a mood for teaching anybody anything, and he gave their problem only half his mind. He could feel the disappointment of the nuns, but he was concentrating on the boss nun, and he couldn't give any thought to the others. When Mother Maria Martha clapped her hands at the conclusion of the lesson, he braced himself. "I want to talk to you," he said. "I've been doing work for you, good work. I want pay for what I do." She sat silent, with her hands clasped in front of her. Her small eyes looked at him out of that wrinkled mask of her face, but there was no light in them. He did not know whether she understood him or not. If she did, she would not admit it. She could make a person feel wrong, like a miserable sinner, by just looking at him. If she refused to cross over into English, he couldn't talk to her. He looked past her to the little table under the statue of the Mother of Jesus in the corner of the room. There was a book on the table, a big book, and it talked to him. The Bible! He crossed the room and looked at it, turning a few pages. The type was outlandish and did not look like words, but no other book was organized like this one. "You wait right here," he said. "I'm coming back." He was afraid that she would not wait, that she would close the door on him, but she waited. He brought his own Bible from the station wagon. It was the one he got in the army. He had a passage in his mind, and he turned pages rapidly. He tore half of the wrapping from a package of cigarettes and wrote on the white side, Luke 10:7. Mother Maria Martha rose heavily and crossed the room to her big Bible. She turned the pages, and he knew what she was reading when the page turning stopped. "And in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire." It wasn't exactly what he wanted to say, but he hoped that she would get the idea about the laborer. She walked slowly back and reached for his pencil. In bold letters, she wrote, Proverbs 1:14. He spun his own pages and read, "Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse." "No," he said, "I'm a poor man. I have to work for wages." Mother Maria Martha did not change expression. Without returning to consult her Bible, she wrote again on the fragment of cigarette package, Matthew 6:28-29. "And why not take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these." Homer read, baffled. This old woman had answers out of the book which surprised him. They did not come to grips with the situation. They did not deal directly with his right to be paid, but they slowed down a man in argument. Before he went into the army, he had had a head filled with Bible words and figures, but they would not march straight for him now as they did once. It wouldn't make any difference. This old woman wasn't going to pay him. She'd never had any intention of paying him. She sat straight with her unblinking eyes fixed on his face. "Schmidt," she said, "tomorrow, Sunday est. Der Mass in Piedras es 9 by der clock." "I don't go to Mass." "We do." She sat immovable, letting the statement stand in all finality until his comprehension caught up with it. She expected him to drive the nuns to Mass. "How did you get there before I came?" he said. "We walked." That too had finality in it, completeness. Piedras was a little town. Homer had driven through it before he stopped here. It was over 2 miles away. He thought about those nuns working hard all day on thin rations, walking miles along the road on Sunday. He liked those nuns. It wasn't fair to them. "I'll drive you in," he said. He walked out then, not expecting thanks and not wanting any. A man was free when he could say yes or say no. Old Mother had her ways, and she was a tricky woman, but she hadn't asked him to take her to Mass. He had to be honest about it. She hadn't asked him that. That wasn't her way. She put a problem up to a man. She knew how to set a problem up for him, so there wasn't anything he could do but take it from her.